This is you. You're 14 years old and carrying a secret that weighs more than any load crossing this dusty highway. You're sitting on a cracked curb in the Las Cruces neighborhood, a neighborhood where the streets don't have official names, where the houses are unpainted cinder block and stray dogs sleep under abandoned cars that nobody ever comes to claim. In your right hand, you've got a burner phone with a crack running corner to corner across the screen. In your left hand, you've got nothing, just knuckles raw from making fists too many times under the covers at night, biting your lips so you don't make a sound, so nobody in your house can hear what you feel when you think about things you're not supposed to think about. Things that in this world, on these streets, in this business, can get you killed in ways you don't even want to picture. Because you're not just a cartel lookout, you're a cartel lookout who likes men. And in the place where you live, that combination doesn't have a name, it has a sentence. But let's start at the beginning, because nobody is born being this. Your mother's name is Lorena, 38 years old, looks 55. She works at a tortilla shop starting at 5 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, then rides 2 buses across the city to clean offices until 10 at night. She comes home dragging her feet, hands blistered from the hot dough, the smell of bleach soaked into her clothes. She leaves you a plate of rice and eggs covered with a paper napkin on the stove. Sometimes the rice has a little chicken in it. Those are the good nights. Your father, Don Aurelio, works at a mechanic shop where they pay him by the day. When there's work, the family eats. When there isn't, he sits in the doorway of the house with a warm beer and stares at the street with that hollow expression of men who have already accepted that life beat them. He's never hit you, but he's never hugged you either. The men in your neighborhood don't hug their kids. They teach them not to cry, not to complain, to be as hard as the cinder block their houses are made of. You have a little sister, Lupita, 9 years old, still believes in the 3 kings because every January you find a way to leave her a cheap gift under her pillow. She's the only person in the world who makes you smile without having to fake it. School was the first place you understood you were different. Not different like a kid who's quieter or skinnier than the rest. Different in a way that had no words in your 10-year-old vocabulary. At recess, while the other boys chased girls and shoved each other competing over who was toughest, you felt something strange in your stomach when you looked at Daniel, the 6th grade kid who always had long hair and smiled in a way that made you feel like the ground was shifting under your feet. You didn't know what that was. You only knew you had to hide it the way you hide a stolen bill, deep inside, where nobody can find it. Because in your neighborhood, in your school, in your house, the words that describe what you feel are used as insults. You hear them every day. At the corner store, on the dirt court, at the dinner table when your dad talks about somebody from the block with contempt in his voice. You hear them and smile a fake smile while something inside you breaks into pieces so small they can't be put back together. One Tuesday after school, you're standing at the corner of the main street watching men arrive in trucks with no license plates. They carry long-range radios, count bills in the shade of a dead tree, wear thick gold chains that shine like little artificial suns, ostrich skin boots that cost more than 6 months of your family's rent. You watch the respect they command at the corner store. The lady gives them their soda without charging. The other men in the neighborhood look down when they walk by. The women look at them in a way you recognize, because it's the same way you look at certain things you're not supposed to look at. You want that life. Not the women, not the attention, but the certainty. The certainty of being someone nobody can touch, nobody can question, nobody can look down on. You figure that if you're strong enough, useful enough, dangerous enough, nobody will ever dare to find out what you're carrying inside. One of them walks up to you. His name is El Mosco, 22, thin, dark-skinned, a scar through his eyebrow that gives him the look of a war veteran. He offers you 200 pesos a week for a simple job. Sit on the corner with the burner phone. When you see patrol cars, dial a number. Say a code word. Sometimes it's rain, sometimes it's storm. Nothing else. No questions, no names. 200 pesos a week. For your family, that's the difference between chicken and plain beans. You say yes without thinking twice, not because you're brave, but because hunger doesn't negotiate and the fear of being found out hides better when you have something bigger to worry about. The first few months are routine. You sit on the corner, watch the street, send the alerts when you're supposed to. The men barely register you exist. To them, you're a disposable object, a cheap pair of eyes, a breathing alarm system. If you fail, they replace you. If you talk, they disappear you. Simple as that. But inside that mechanical routine, your secret keeps growing like a plant in the dark, no light, but stubborn. One day, El Mosco shows up with a new guy. His name is Emilio. 19, curly hair, light eyes, a crooked smile that does something to your pulse. He's going to be a lookout on the next block. El Mosco tells you to show him how everything works. You spend an entire afternoon alone with Emilio, walking him through the patrol routes, the schedules, the code words, and the whole time you talk, your voice trembles for reasons that have nothing to do with the job. Emilio looks you straight in the eyes when you speak. Nobody does that. Nobody has ever done that. That night, lying on your mattress with Lupita asleep in the bed next to you and your parents snoring behind the curtain that divides the room, you think about Emilio's eyes and feel simultaneously the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing you've ever felt in your life. Weeks pass, and Emilio becomes the closest thing you have to a friend. You smoke stolen cigarettes on the roof of an abandoned house while the sun goes down behind the dry hills. You talk about things that have nothing to do with work. Music, movies you watched on borrowed phones, what it would be like to live in another city, another country, another life. One afternoon, Emilio asks why you never talk about girls. The question hits you like a bucket of ice water in the middle of a heat wave. You make something up about not having time, being focused on the work, girls being complicated. Emilio laughs and doesn't push it, but you spend 3 nights not sleeping, replaying every word of that conversation, looking for signs that he suspects something, calculating what would happen if someone like El Mosco found out. Because you know exactly what would happen. In this world, masculinity isn't a trait. It's a survival condition. The cartel's men don't tolerate anything they read as weakness. And what you feel, what you are, doesn't get classified as different here. It gets classified as weakness. You've heard the stories. The lookout from the floor's neighborhood who got discovered with another man. What they did to him can't be told, not because the words don't exist, but because your stomach can't hold them assembled into a sentence. So you carry your secret like someone carrying a bomb strapped to their chest. Every move you make is calculated. The way you walk, the way you talk, the way you look at things. All of it designed to project something you're not. You become the best actor in the neighborhood, and the stage is your own life. Tell us in the comments what country and what neighborhood you're watching from, because this story repeats itself in more places than you can imagine. At 17, the police raid the block and you're the first one they grab. The men vanish into alleys they've known since childhood. You don't have connections, don't have a lawyer. Your family doesn't have money to get you out. You spend 6 months in a juvenile detention center eating watered-down rice and sleeping on rusty bunk beds. That place is a hell inside hell. The other inmates smell the difference like hunting dogs. They don't know exactly what it is, but they sense something. They test you constantly. They push you to see if you react like a man. They ask you about women to see if your answers sound convincing. You learn to fight not out of courage, but out of pure necessity. The first time you break someone's nose with a clean punch, you feel sick with yourself. But disgust is a cheap price to pay for surviving. You come out quieter, harder, with a shell so thick that sometimes you yourself forget there's a real person underneath. You go back to the same corner. This time, they notice you. They give you a new phone and a better job. At 19, you're a runner. You dropped out in middle school. You don't watch corners anymore. That's for the new kids. Now, you move product. They give you a 98 Suru with a manual transmission, an address scrawled on a piece of paper, a strict schedule. You drive 6 hours to the border on back roads where there's no phone signal and no living soul for miles. The car has 20 kilos hidden in a modified gas tank. If you get stopped, the car isn't in your name. The product isn't yours, but you go to prison anyway. They pay you 3,000 pesos per run. You only get paid if you arrive. If the car breaks down in the middle of the desert, that's your problem. If you get robbed on the road, your problem. If the police pull you over at a random checkpoint, your problem. Emilio also moved up. Now he's your route partner. You ride the 6 hours together in that beat-up Tsuru on roads that look like scars cut into the earth. And those hours are the most dangerous and at the same time the only ones in which you feel halfway alive. You talk about everything. The unbearable heat, the music crackling out of the one working speaker, the future neither of you is going to have. One night, parked in the middle of nowhere waiting for the delivery window, the desert stretching in every direction like a black ocean, Emilio tells you something that stops you cold. He says he also has a secret that he's never told anyone, that if he tells you, he needs to know it's going to die with you. Your heart pounds so hard you're certain he can hear it in the silence of the desert. Emilio looks at you with those light eyes shining in the moonlight and says 3 words that change everything. 3 words I'm not going to repeat here because they belong to him and to you and to that night, but they mean you are not alone, that you were never alone, that there is another person in this hell carrying the same bomb in their chest. What follows is a secret inside a secret. 2 layers of hiding that could get them both killed. On the outside, they remain what the cartel needs them to be. 2 efficient runners, 2 young hard men who don't ask questions and deliver everything on time. On the inside, they build a tiny world that exists only in the dead hours between deliveries. Conversations in low voices inside the suru. Glances that last half a second longer than allowed. A brush of hands in the darkness of the desert that holds more truth than every word you've spoken in your life. It's the closest thing to happiness you've ever known. And also the closest thing to absolute danger. If what you're hearing is moving something inside you, subscribe, because what comes next is where this story truly breaks. At 25, you're a soldier. You survived 4 years as a runner, made 30 trips without a single failure. 30 times you crossed the line between freedom and prison. You did 18 months in a state penitentiary sharing a cell with murderers and rapists. You didn't give anyone up, not when they beat you, not when they offered you a reduced sentence. You came out with credibility. Now they give you an assault rifle, tactical boots, a vest that says police but isn't. Your job is no longer to transport product. It's to transport fear. When someone doesn't pay the tax, you show up with 3 others in a blacked-out truck. You break windows, torch vehicles, leave messages spray-painted on walls. They pay you $8,000 a week in cash. But Emilio also moved up, and now they're in the same unit. And the constant closeness is a poisoned blessing. There's a guy in the group named El Chato, 30 years old, built like a bull, small eyes that don't miss anything. El Chato is the kind of man who measures everyone else's manhood with an unforgiving ruler. He makes constant comments, tests everybody. When the others talk about women during downtime, you invent stories with the ease of a novelist, describing encounters you never had with a precision that convinces everyone. Everyone except El Chato, who looks at you with a nearly imperceptible tilt of his head, like an animal that senses something out of place but can't quite name what it is. One night, after a particularly heavy job, the group drinks at a safe house. El Chato, 5 beers in, fires a question at Emilio like a casual bullet. Asks why he never brings girls around. Emilio answers with a forced laugh that to your ears sounds as fake as a plastic coin. But the others laugh, and the moment passes. That night, you don't sleep. You know El Chato is putting a puzzle together in his head, and sooner or later, the pieces are going to fit. At 32, the world you built with such precision starts to crack. You're a plaza boss. You oversee a small city of 5,000 people. 2 bars with pool tables, a gas station, a municipal market. Everything pays you a cut. The mayor greets you with a nervous smile. The police commander eats breakfast at your restaurant every Thursday. You have $10,000 a month in cash, a 2-story house with air conditioning, a brand new truck. But you sleep with a gun under your pillow and another on the nightstand. And Emilio isn't close anymore. He got sent to another plaza 300 miles away. You communicate through burner phones you swap every week, brief messages coded in a cipher you invented together, a phrase that means I miss you disguised as an operational report. The distance is a slow knife, but it's also protection because together you were vulnerable in a way that apart you are not. Then El Chato talks, not with proof, because he doesn't have any. He talks with insinuations, which in this world are just as lethal. He tells your direct superior, a lieutenant named Don Silvio, that something doesn't add up about you. That you're too private, that nobody's ever seen you with a real woman. that maybe you're hiding something. Don Silvio is 38 years old. He controls 3 complete states, moves tons of product every month through tunnels and small planes, never personally touches the merchandise, just manages numbers on encrypted computers. He takes 100 calls a day, authorizes executions with a single word, and when he receives El Chato's insinuation, he doesn't dismiss it. In this business, paranoia is a job requirement. Any secret is a potential threat because a man who hides something can hide anything. Questionable loyalty, contact with rivals, cooperation with intelligence agencies. For Don Silvio, your orientation isn't the problem. The problem is that you have something you haven't told him, and in his dictionary, that's spelled the same way as betrayal. He sends 2 men to surveil you. For 3 weeks, they follow you without your knowledge. They go through your discarded phones, your movements, your contacts. They find nothing connecting you to rivals or to law enforcement. But they find the messages with Emilio. They decode them with the patience of someone disarming a bomb. And when they understand what those messages say, the silence that follows is more terrifying than any verbal threat. Don Silvio summons you to a ranch on the outskirts of the city. You arrive knowing something is wrong, but not exactly what. The ranch has a rusted iron gate, an empty corral, and a wooden table under a mesquite tree where Don Silvio is sitting with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He invites you to sit. He pours both glasses with a calm that reminds you of the first boss you ever knew, that same calm of men who hold the absolute power to decide whether someone keeps breathing. Don Silvio looks at you for a full minute without speaking. Then he sets a phone on the table with the screen lit up. On the screen are your messages with Emilio, all of them, decoded, laid open like a body on an autopsy table. Your blood turns to ice. Your mind calculates options at the speed of panic. Denying is pointless. The evidence is right there. Running is impossible. There are 3 armed men behind you. Begging is a weakness that in this context is the same as signing your sentence. You do the only thing you can. You go still, eyes on the messages on the screen, waiting for the verdict like a man in a death row chapel. Don Silvio speaks. What he says surprises you so much that for a moment you think you're dreaming. He doesn't threaten you. He doesn't insult you. He tells you he doesn't care what you do with your private life as long as the business runs. That your numbers are spotless, that your plaza generates more than the other 2 combined, that replacing you would cost months of instability he can't afford. But then his voice drops a register, and he adds something that lodges like a poisoned splinter. He tells you El Chato isn't going to stay quiet. That, if this gets out among the troops, your authority collapses. That a plaza boss without authority is a corpse still walking around. He says you have 2 options. The first is to handle El Chato yourself, to prove that nobody can threaten you. The second is for Don Silvio to handle the whole problem permanently, including you and Emilio. He leaves both options floating in the desert air like 2 vultures waiting. That night, you drive back to the city with your hands so tight on the wheel, your knuckles go white. You think about Emilio. You think about your mother Lorena, still working double shifts, but now at least with medicine and a house with a cement floor. About your father, who stopped drinking when you started sending money and for the first time told you he was proud of you without knowing what he should be ashamed of. About Lupita, who's 16 now and wants to study nursing and whose high school you pay for with money that smells like blood, but that in her hands becomes clean notebooks and a possible future. You think about all of that. And then you think about El Chato, who at this moment is sleeping soundly without knowing his fate is in your hands. I'm not going to tell you which choice you make because that's not the point. The point is that at 32 years old, you're sitting in a truck on a dark road in Sinaloa, and the person you are on the inside and the person the world forces you to be on the outside have never been farther apart. You are a man who loves another man in a world built on the premise that that love is a death sentence. Every level you climbed on this ladder promised you more power, more money, more respect, and every level took a larger piece of the possibility of being who you actually are. The 14-year-old lookout hid his secret out of fear of rejection. The 19-year-old runner hid it out of fear of violence. The 25-year-old soldier hid it out of fear of losing his place. The 32-year-old plaza boss hides it out of fear of losing everything, including the people he loves. And if you keep climbing, if you make it to lieutenant, to cartel boss, to that kingpin living in an underground bunker, eating food prepared by a chef who can't leave, seeing the sun twice a month, running a $5 billion empire he can't spend, the question is still the same. The same one you asked yourself at 10 years old when you watched Daniel at recess and felt the ground shift under your feet. The question isn't whether the world is going to accept you. The question is whether you'll ever be able to stop hiding. The most brutal truth in this story isn't the cartel's violence. It's that this country, these streets, these neighborhoods without names, manufacture cages inside of cages. Poverty is a cage. Organized crime is a cage inside that cage. And being who you truly are in a place that forbids it is a cage inside the cage inside the cage. And every lock was put there by someone who chose silence over justice. If this story made you feel something you didn't expect to feel, subscribe so we can keep telling the stories nobody else is willing to tell.